Our week 3 health focus is on hydration. So, first off, what is hydration? First thing that comes to mind when we think of hydration is water. And that is a big part of it, but what also is going to come into play is electrolytes. And we're going to kind of get into the balance of all that today. So, why do we care about hydration related to health? Of course, most of our body is made of water. I'm sure everybody's heard this. So that's very important. All of our cells are filled with water. We have cells around or water around our cells, all in our muscles. Everything is filled with water. And because of this, very small changes in your hydration level, specifically dehydration, can really affect your performance physically and mentally. When it comes to our exercise performance specifically, I can speak on is every about 2% dehydration. So if you have, let's say you weigh 200 pounds and you lose 2% of your weight in water, which is not that uncommon when you're doing exercise, you're actually looking at a 10% decrease in your exercise performance. And it's very similar when you think about mental aspect as well. So if you're working really hard on a project or something, or if you're doing work and you're dehydrated, your mental performance is also going to decline. Some other reasons why hydration is important is really often overlooked. And this actually, I found this out about myself as well, as I was a little bit dehydrated in terms of the electrolyte balance, and it was making me feel very lethargic. So when I got that imbalance, specifically like taking in a little bit more sodium, it actually helped my energy levels to come up as well. A few long-term health effects of hydration is your blood pressure. I'm sure there's a lot of people, suffering from high blood pressure. And, it's not a cure, I'm not going to say that, or it's not the exact cause, but hydration can play an important role. Another long-term effect that there is some evidence, it's not a guarantee, but there is some evidence to indicate that Alzheimer's can be triggered by dehydration. So chronic, you're looking at years of lack of water intake or lack of hydration can lead to basically the sides of your brain shrinks because just like we talked about, everything in your body consists of water. And that leads to Alzheimer's over time, possibly leads to Alzheimer's over time. And last, what probably a lot of people will be considering, especially given the nature of our competition here, is weight loss. So how hydration can affect weight loss, and specifically fat loss. So there is some evidence to suggest that dehydration decreases your metabolism and your rate of lipolysis, which all that means is just your rate of fat loss. And proper hydration will speed up your metabolism and speed up fat loss. So those are a few reasons why you need to consider hydration and the levels of your hydration. Next, let's get more into that of what hydration is in terms of the electrolytes. So your electrolytes that we're concerned with are sodium, potassium, magnesium, chloride, and calcium. Now there's a lot of talk about, sodium being bad and, we need to limit our salt intake. That mainly is coming from processed foods though, so we're not if you're eating a healthy whole food diet, fruits and vegetables and lean meats and good stuff like that, your sodium levels are really not going to be as big of a concern. High levels of sodium are not going to be as big of a concern. So these electrolytes, you have balances of all these things. The most common is sodium and chloride, which those are just the two components of table salt, sodium chloride. Those are the kind of the most important ones, or those are the most prevalent, I should say, not the most important. They're all important. That's going to be the highest levels that we need to replace and replenish during our daily activities and workouts. What happens if you don't replace those things is what's called hyponatremia. So hyponatremia is basically a lack of salt in the cells. It's really too much water in the cells compared to the levels of sodium. You've probably heard of people like needing to go to the hospital because they've hydrated too much or they drank too much water, and that's basically what's happening. So that's why the electrolyte balance is very important. Now, it's pretty uncommon to experience hyponatremia. It's really, you're only going to see this in like endurance athletes, people running marathons, things like that. But it still is something to consider, especially, sometimes you see people carrying around like gallon jugs of water. That's not necessarily the healthiest thing to do either. You could be overhydrated, basically. So how do we know if we are properly hydrated? First thing you can go by, of course, is thirst. Now, there is some issues with just relying on thirst because a lot of people tend to not really have a good grasp on their thirst levels. So sometimes you might not feel thirsty when in fact you are dehydrated. Especially this has been shown in exercise. People really tend to underdrink or underhydrate when they're exercising because they don't realize how thirsty they are. So it's not a perfect method, but it is definitely the first one. If you're thirsty, you probably need to hydrate. If you're not thirsty, it doesn't necessarily mean you don't need to hydrate, but at least you're not in dire need probably at that time. The next way you can tell if you're hydrated is to see what color your urine is. We've probably all heard this before, but the The issue is a lot of people think that they need to have crystal clear pee. That's actually not the case. That actually is an indication that you're low on electrolytes and you have a little too much water. If your urine is too yellow or really dark yellow, most likely you're dehydrated. Most likely you need a little bit more water. One caveat to that is there's some foods and different vitamins and things that can make your urine a little bit darker, especially if you're taking a multivitamin. So if you just took a multivitamin or something and you see that it's really dark colored, you don't really have to worry as much about that. So check your urine color. You have to take into consideration that your toilet is diluting the color. So if it looks like it's like just a hint of yellow, you're like, oh, perfect, I'm perfectly hydrated. It's actually probably a lot darker than that, but you have like a gallon of water that's clear already in the toilet. So really it has to be very, very light yellow that you're looking for. Another way to tell if you are dehydrated is something I touched on earlier, is the lethargy. So if you're really low energy, that could be one of your signs that you are dehydrated. So like I mentioned for myself, I was noticing that myself, and the only thing I changed is started adding a little bit of sodium or electrolyte tablets into my water, or more on the food, or even grab a snack like something like a pickle that's really high in sodium. And that would kind of bring me right back up. Within a matter of minutes, I was feeling a lot better. So if you are somebody that experiences those low levels of energy, that's something to consider. So now that we've talked about how you can tell if you're hydrated or if you're not hydrated and why it's important, next we'll talk about how to properly hydrate. So first off, everyone's going to be a little bit different, so keep that in mind. And some of the numbers I'll give you, you'll have to play with them a little bit yourself to perfect it. One thing about hydration is not everything comes from water. So kind of a standard way of looking at it is that about 50% of our hydration comes from water, 30% comes from other liquids, things like coffee or tea, whatever you're drinking, and then the last 20% comes from food. So these numbers can vary, especially depending on your diet. So if you're eating a diet really high in fruits and vegetables and just whole foods, your percentage is going to be a little bit higher because those are really high in water. So that's actually a good way to hydrate, is to eat a lot of whole foods, especially fruits and vegetables, because you're getting a lot of electrolytes in that as well, especially if you sprinkle a little bit of salt on there. So even things like steak and chicken and fish actually have a fairly high content of water. It's just like we say, our muscles are filled with water, so are animals. It's the same concept. So even a steak or something is going to have like 60% of it is going to be water and help you hydrate. Now, on the other hand, if you're eating a lot of processed foods, then it's going to be way, 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 way lower. So something like a biscuit has about 3% water. So if you're eating foods like that or like fast food, your percentage of your hydration is going to come mainly from your water, which means you have to increase your water intake. So if you're having, if that means you're going to be getting 80% of your hydration from your food, you're going to have to up your water intake by probably, 1.5 times. So when it comes to this diet portion and how you can tell if you're eating whole foods that are going to be high in water and help you to hydrate, it's really just things that you don't need to list ingredients on. So if you're eating an apple, it's an apple. There's going to be a lot of water. If you have a steak, it's going to be a steak. That's all it is. There's going to be water. If you're eating something that's in a box and it has like 30 things in the ingredients, your chances of being hydrated from that are much, much lower. So along with this, these processed foods and the whole foods, and talking about the electrolyte balance, this is actually the issue, when sodium's been kind of demonized the last, decade or couple decades. That's basically because of the processed foods, though, that we eat. So sprinkling salt on your food, if you eat very healthy, is actually really good for you and very important because you need that sodium chloride in your body. Now, if you're eating McDonald's every day, you're going to get about 4 to 5 times the level of sodium than you would if you're eating whole food. And so that's kind of where that link to high blood pressure comes in. So if you're eating a lot of processed food like that, back off the sodium. But if you're not, if you're eating whole food, make sure to sprinkle salt on your food and eat every day, every meal. You need to be intaking that. So how much actual water do you need to be drinking? A good place to start is to go by half of your body weight in ounces. So if you weigh 200 pounds, and this body weight is going by pounds here too, not kilograms. So if you're 100 pounds or 200 pounds, you need to be having 100 ounces of water. And just for reference, a gallon of water is 128 ounces. Now remember, everybody is a little bit different. So, just because let's say you weigh 200 pounds, maybe you can get away with 80 ounces, but maybe you also need 120 ounces. That's going to be where you have to kind of figure out for yourself. And it's also going to be based on your exercise and your diet during that day. Now, since we're all doing a lot of exercise right now, you also need to know how to hydrate during exercise. So a good rule of thumb is every 15 minutes during your exercise, you need to drink your body weight divided by 30 in ounces. So if you weigh 200 pounds, you're going to need about 6.5 ounces of water slash electrolytes, that solution, every 15 minutes. So if you're drinking, out of a standard like 16 to 20 ounce water bottle, it's a little bit over a quarter of that. So should be going through like a whole bottle of water during the workout, if not a little bit more. So how do you get these electrolytes into your water? I buy tablets. They're little electrolyte tablets that I can drop into my water. And they have, the ones that I use right now have about 300 milligrams of sodium, 300 milligrams potassium, then some small amounts of magnesium and calcium. So that's a good way you can do it. There's a lot of like electrolyte supplements that you can use, and you can just go on Amazon and get some of those, or usually Walmart has them. Wherever you go shopping at, you can usually find. Or you can just simply take a pinch of salt, put it in your water. Sometimes I make some lemon, it's kind of like a lemonade, but I'll just squeeze like half a lemon or a full lemon into a water bottle, like 20 to 30 ounces, add a pinch of salt, and that's actually a really good electrolyte solution because you're getting the potassium from the lemon, sodium and chloride from the salt, obviously, and then depending on the salt you use, you have a little bit of magnesium and calcium in there as well. A lot of people, first thing that comes to mind when you think of the electrolyte solutions is Gatorade and Powerade. While those can be helpful in certain situations, one, of course, they're really high in sugar, and in reality, it's not really the sugar that you're burning during exercise, so they're not ideal. And also, the electrolyte balance is not that great. In our electrolyte solutions, they're all going to be a little bit different, but if you can find one that's about a 3-to-1 ratio of sodium to potassium, you're going to be doing really well there. But in reality, if you're not using anything, any of those are going to work, or even just a pinch of salt is going to be better than nothing. It's going to be better than plain water. So let's put it all together, and really what you are going to take away from this is how you can stay hydrated. The first thing, when you wake up in the morning, your first thing you should be doing is hydrating. You really should not be reaching for coffee or any energy drinks or anything like that first thing. You need to be having some water and preferably electrolytes with that. A good start to that is at least 8 ounces. If you're just take a sip of water, that's not going to be enough. You need to have a full glass, hopefully a little bit of salt in there or electrolyte solution. And that's going to help kind of jumpstart your day and set you off good. You don't want to go into the day being dehydrated. You want to go into it just being perfectly hydrated. The next thing you can do is plan ahead. So, you see a lot of people carrying on jugs of water, whatever, a big water bottle. I use this Hydro Flask. It's all beat up, you can tell. I use it a lot. It's 40 ounces. So for me, I need to go through, with my on exercise days, I probably go through about 3 of those. That's not including any other liquid I drink. So get yourself a water bottle, or if you like to use, plastic water bottles, just know how many you need to drink. That way you don't really have to think about it during the day. You're already planned and it's already easy for you to get set up. Remember that calculation was half of your body weight in pounds in ounces. So if you weigh 200 pounds, that means you're going to be drinking 100 ounces a day. And then you can scale up or down as needed if you feel, if it's not enough water or if it's a little bit too much. And take into consideration things like the temperature and humidity. So dry weather, you need to have a little bit more water. Hot weather, a little bit more water. Colder, you might not need as much, but it's usually dry when it's cold, so you kind of need to even that out as well. And the last thing, and often overlooked thing that you can do, is eating unprocessed food. So lots of fruits and vegetables. That's going to help you stay hydrated, not only with its water content, but the electrolyte content as well. And if you're eating unprocessed foods, make sure you're using salt. Just regular sea salt or table salt, whatever you use is perfectly fine.